Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic. It is time to look at how TBH, my regular melty brain, performed at ARC's June meet. Now, for those of you who missed the last video building the dual spinner melty brain, things did not go very well in that video, and at the last second I had to throw a whole bunch of components into this robot and get it working for the June meet. So there's not too much changed in here. In fact, the actual code that's running on the melty brain board was not set up for this robot in particular. It was set up for the last version of the Vert melty. So things needed to be tuned on the day just to make sure that it even melted in the first place. So really the only changes to this robot from the last time you saw it was that I actually slapped a little bit more weight on the ends because I had just a little bit of weight left over the last time we ran this. So I figured, let's just make the weapons heavier. And that also meant changing up the bolting arrangement a little bit just to make sure everything got held down. I still think I have bent a couple of these bolts, but you'll see how and why as we go through these fights. Speaking of, the very first fight up is up against a robot called Killercorn. This is a four-wheel drive brick. So that was a bit of a mixed bag of a fight. First of all, we delivered some really big shots. This is the thing that I'm kind of lacking at this point, as I'm getting my melties to the point that they can deliver big hits when they get a chance. And in this fight, it got a couple of chances to do that, which was very, very cool. It also didn't shut down, which is an issue that we've had in the past. So that was a very, very nice thing to see. But of course it didn't go our way for the entire fight there, or the end of that fight really, because yes, an inopportune bounce put us into the corner, and then trying to spin back up, he kind of angled and hit us and got a nice little ricochet into the pit where we did not have enough vertical or melty speed, not vertical speed, melty speed to ricochet back out of the pit. That is one of the advantages that this long boy has, is that being this long, it can pit escape pretty easily by just kind of like hopping its way out of the pits. But that only works if we're at full melty speed, or I think about half melty speed. To be honest, I've never really tested it, but I do know that, yeah, when it's going at full clap, it can definitely bounce out of the pit. That's just, you know, you need to be at full speed and under control-ish to do that. Well, as under control as you can be for a melty brain robot. With that, let us move on to the next fight, which is up against a robot called Choppy. I'll also say a big thank you to Chris, who has been coming along to the last couple of events and started to film and upload fight footage. The fight footage you're about to see is shot by Chris.
3, 2, 1, go!
yeah, we can still dish out the big hits, and it helped us in this particular case. But there's some other things I want to talk about first of all. So first, the ping-ponging around the arena with a melty brain is so real, especially in this fight. The hits were throwing both robots in each direction, and I was often bouncing off at least one wall on my way back through. The other thing here is that there was a really interesting point where the melty brain was up by the pit, where the frame rate of the camera basically syncs to the meltying speed, and that is why the melty looks like it's just kind of like wobbling about like this and not doing a full spin, is because the frame rate and the spin rate are very, very close together. But what that particular footage showed me was that as I'm trying to translate, like actively forcing the robot to move, it does change the speed significantly, because that frame sync between, or that sync-ish between the camera and the robot dropped, and suddenly the robot looks like it's actually spinning again. So I am not accounting for that correctly in my code, I think, which is why, especially in this fight, you can kind of see it. This melty works a lot better when I do burst movement, is what I'm going to call it. So like have the robot spun up and go ksk, 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 and not try and drive in a direction, because that change in speed isn't accounted for correctly, which means that the melty's heading gets lost very quickly. And so rather than driving in a straight line, it kind of like wobbles and it just disappears, and it doesn't work very well. So burst driving is fine, but until we fix that issue with the code, we're never going to get a straight line drive at somebody. And I really obviously want to get that down at some point, because that is kind of the big draw of a melty brain, is to be able to spin up and then aim at your opponent and go. And yeah, at this point we're kind of like doing little dashes towards them, which gives them more control of the fight. And as part of the issue that we had in the first fight, is he was able to control where I was bouncing, because I wasn't able to move effectively enough to get out of the way. All right, so that was one win and one loss. We're doing pretty well, actually, especially for a robot that got thrown together on the morning of. So let's move on through to the next fight, which is up against Iron Tooth. This is the biggest horizontal spinner of the league. It's part of the reason the teeth got changed over to being solid steel, was because I can't remember exactly how high up Iron Tooth hits, and my idea was just to have him hit steel one way or another.
Smart. Oh!
I jinxed him. My strategy didn't work.
So that one was a little bit unfortunate, mostly in the fact that Iron Tooth just did not have a very good time there. First and foremost, his weapon wasn't working going into this fight. There was only very few Beetle weights at this event, which meant our turnaround times between fights got drastically shortened, and unfortunately he took some damage in a previous fight, or something. I don't really know, to be honest, because I was sorting out my own issues, and yes, was unable to spin up in that particular fight. And instead of trying to run the weapon into me, he decided to try and back up into me, and then made a driving error because he was thinking of the back of the robot as the front or something along those lines, and accidentally drove himself into the pit, which does happen. So yeah, we won that one, but not really in a way that I like to win a fight. So yeah, not really much more to talk about on that one. Let's move on to the next fight, which is up against a robot called Anti-Dozer, a 6-wheel but actually 2-wheel brick.
Out. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ah, there we go. So that was back to more of what I like to see. The melty being an agent of chaos and just throwing some massive hits in there. And this is kind of also what the melty was designed for. Like the second hit there where we were spun up in that back corner and Anti-Dozer just kind of had to come to us and then engage. I mean, again, I still do want to be able to like aim at somebody, but at the same time, when they are forced to come and engage, there's no good way to attack a melty brain. The only thing you can really do to a melty brain is try and angle it so that when you get the hit on the melty brain, they ping pong into the pit, essentially. So, and of course that is sometimes hard to do, and also you need to be able to take the hit first. And you have to also make sure that when you're angling, you don't also end up in a position where you get yourself in the pit off of the massive shot, because the robots are just going to go flying, which is great. I love watching two Beetleweights fly across the arena after a hit, which is why I really, really like this robot in particular. And so yes, unfortunately they didn't get that in this particular case. They got shunted over towards the pit. But concerningly for me, I had an electronics gremlin poke its head up at the end here as well. So as they were hanging on the edge of the pit and being counted out there, I wasn't actually meltying properly. The light on the melty for the heading was just kind of flashing a lot and not in a consistent manner. And when I tried to translate, I was getting weird sounds out of the motor, but not actually any movement. It was almost as if suddenly the robot was thinking that it was driving like 50 times faster than it was. I have no idea how that happened. However, I was able to drop out of the melty mode and use the tank steer mode to drive the robot back over to the door at the end of the fight. So I wouldn't have been counted out. Like I could have just kept driving around just as a less weapony robot at that point, but I couldn't move or translate in the melty mode. Now, again, the electronics inside of here basically had no changes to them. It's very, very possible, as a couple of you out there mentioned, that all I need is some more capacitors over my rectifier so that the massive like voltage spikes caused by the wheels spinning up and down don't get through to the microcontroller and cause all sorts of issues, because microcontrollers are very, very sensitive about how much current and voltage and stuff they get at any given point. So I should do that and I will do that, but it didn't happen for this event, and it is possibly the cause of that weird melty failure at the end there. But of course, because I do have that alternate mode and that alternate mode kept working somehow, I was able to win that fight as well. And then lastly up, we have Hurt Feelings, a very nasty undercutter.
The module stops working for the
Okay, well, that one is all on me. I messed up my start. I was so very concerned with getting out of my corner before spinning up that I messed up the way that I get my melty spin up to happen. So on the controller, I have a switch that is a 3-position switch. So the first position is tank drive, the middle position is an arm, and then the third position is a melty mode. However, when I put the D-Shot code in, for whatever reason, the arm forces the ESCs to rearm, which takes a second. So if I bypass it entirely and go straight into melty mode, the robot just spins up. But if I stop in that middle position, it causes the ESCs to rearm, which takes a good couple of seconds and causes the robot to stop dead, which is exactly what you saw there. I drove out, I got to the seam line, and I put the switch into the middle position, not all the way through into the melty mode. And so I actually had to like back out into drive mode and then flick through into melty mode to get up to speed. And by that time, A, he was already up to speed, and B, he was chasing me down, and I was in trouble, because then I was caught in the back corner, not fully up to speed, and I basically didn't get up to speed from then on out because he stayed on top of me exactly the way he should have done. He drove that fight very, very well. That is exactly what I would have done if I was fighting me in this particular instance. Yeah, he did that very well, and I just kind of limped into the pit, I guess, because again, we never really got up to full damaging speed, which is unfortunate. I really wanted to see what happened when I hit him because his wheels are quite forwards and a little bit exposed. So it would have been interesting to take a nice big melty hit onto those wheels, but As it was, I messed up entirely and we didn't get that. So yeah, now this is an interesting event because as mentioned, there was only a few Beetle weights around and there was actually a lot of B-Div robots. So we didn't actually end up having finals for the Beetle weights. So it was literally just off of round robin scoring, which means we came second. So with the weaponless Melty, we did actually come second for this event, which is incredible. Like I said, I threw this robot together the morning of to cover the fact that the other Melty Brain was not up and running yet. So for this to be a second placer was just mind-blowing to me. That was so very cool. But what was more cool than that was that for the first time in a long time, we did a Beetle Rumble.
Too many robots that don't hit. Yeah, that was a
I love a good rumble, and I love a rumble with a Melty in it. Melties, as I've said in this video already, are an agent of chaos, ping-ponging around the arena, just hitting things like crazy in a rumble that is magnified, and I love it. This was so good. I need to shout out Hurt Feelings though. They got a pit escape in the most wild way possible because they went down into the pit, used the gyro of their weapon to keep them up, and then managed to touch one wheel back out of the pit, and that was somehow enough to drive themselves back out of the pit. That is mind-blowing to me. Obviously, in a real fight, they had touched the bottom of the pit already, so they would be out, but this is a rumble. Rumbles are just for fun, so if you can escape the pit, you absolutely can escape the pit, and you get to keep fighting. And they did for all of 30 seconds before going back in there again, but just the fact that they managed to do that in the first place was wild, and I absolutely love that. Rumbles are so much fun. Anyway, that is going to be it for me from this video. I hope you've enjoyed that one, and I will see you in the next video.